Uh, Welcome to this part of the Hope of HAS sustainability focus, talking about architecture today. Our first speaker is going to be Dan Tyrer. He's design table leader at GMB Architecture and Engineering. He describes himself as a creative at heart. He collaborates with a multidisciplinary design table and all his other colleagues at GMB to shape the culture, process, and quality of design for the firm. He has led architectural design for professional projects for over 20 years, acting as a design champion in all phases of development, from establishing the initial vision through to completion. Dan has been a LEED accredited professional since 2007 and is a fundamental driver in GMB's work in delivering sustainable solutions for their clients. Dan, please take it from here.
Thank you, Bill. Good to be with everybody. Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to be with you today, and looking forward to the discussion. I will try to keep it to the point, and I welcome any questions along the way. And if there is any answer that I can't provide for you on the topic, I certainly am more than willing to track it down and follow up. So thank you. We did check screen sharing, so I'm hoping this is going to work just fine. Am I good? Are we seeing LEED impact? Awesome. So what I'd like to talk about, I think, is a complement to what Cara and Nick are also going to share, and it's great to collaborate with them once again. We've had some opportunities in the past, which is always great to do. So looking forward to their presentations as well. I'd like to focus maybe briefly on what LEED is and some of the structure of it. I don't want to make any assumptions about what people might be familiar with already, but keep that brief and then dive into some examples from our work that are relevant to the topic. And I've called this Beyond Certification because really we see that as a big part of our experience with LEED, and more broadly sustainability is it's really the core of the value of sustainability to our clients, to bottom lines, to the world, to the earth. And so we'll dive more into that through some examples. I think. Try this. There we go. So just a real quick description of the purpose and overview of LEED certification and how it has impacted architectural design, choice of building materials, other aesthetic considerations. I've broken this down into 5 parts. Overview, pursuing certifications. I have a project, we were just talking about it this morning, that I'll share briefly with you, under construction right now in the Holland area. Actually, all of the projects I'm referencing are in the Holland area. Impact beyond certification. This is, as I mentioned, a big part of our experience with LEED. LEED as sort of a seed for sustainability beyond just the idea of achieving certification. Some takeaways I'd like to offer, and then maybe a little bit about what's next. What's next, both for LEED as well as for how it's impacting our practice. Just a quick note, depending on sources, this can vary a bit, but I think it's meaningful in that it gives some gravity to the importance of our industry, the building industry, and the impact it can have on sustainability and energy consumption. In 2019, buildings consumed 28% of the total end-use energy consumption in the US. We talk a lot, I think, publicly about transportation and cars and that sort of thing, and but the building industry really has a huge role to play in this area. Sorry, I've got navigation bars and everything in front of all my stuff. I'm going to move some things around. So again, just a bit about the structure of LEED on a basic level. I don't want to dive in too deep, but the US GBC, US Green Building Council, and LEED, 1993, the US GBC was founded. In 1998 is really when it started to become a little bit more public as a organized program. version 1.0 was launched in the late 90s. In 2000, the LEED for new buildings goes public, and that's when it really started to make a jump, I think, in terms of awareness and promoting sustainable design, green building design. And then the current version that we are under, and the project I will share in a moment, is operating under is version 4.1, which was launched in 2019 last year. And so a lot of improvements keep getting made to each iteration of this, and kind of a big overarching umbrella that I observe is that the idea of LEED becomes more and more holistic, which is true of a number of sort of green building type programs. If you're familiar with well building, those sorts of things, the ideas of a full sort of human well-being and fitness, wellness, etc. It becomes a broader idea of the impact that the built environment can have on people and on the world. Just some tiers of organization. It was mentioned I am a LEED AP since 2007. That's accredited professional. There's also a LEED Green Associate, which is more of sort of a general understanding, where LEED AP is a little more rigorous of a process and a little deeper understanding of the process of achieving certification and the background of LEED, etc. I happen to be a legacy member from the time when I achieved my accreditation. There are since more focused possibilities, building design and construction, interior design and construction. There are a number of programs, so sub-programs under the idea of LEED, and continuous education is a part of that, as well as a number of professional credentials have. And then even deeper are certificates and badges. There's specific expertise and experience that are more relevant to individual accreditation benchmarks under the LEED program. So whether it's sustainable sites or materials or interior environment, mechanical systems, there are specific badges and certificates under those. So the piece that we find most relevant, I would say, in our practice day to day are these two rating systems that I've highlighted: the building design and construction and the interior design and construction. I'm seeing the chat flash. If there's anything specific to me that I should take into account, please let me know. I'm going to keep going. These are the list of sort of the 6 rating systems. There's operations and maintenance, residential, cities and communities, recertification as well, that are more outside the architectural engineering specific. Operations and maintenance, for example, might apply more to sort of the position that CAR is in, for example. And so highlighting the building interior design and construction, I've sort of put them together for the sake of this list on the right, just because there is a lot of overlap between the two. These are our breakdown of the basic buckets within that. Integrative process, location and transportation. So integrative process is very true of the industry in general. It takes all of the systems of a building to make it work, and certainly to make it work under the context of achieving LEED certification. So that's mechanical, electrical, architecture, interiors, all of it. Civil design, location and transportation has to do with connections to transportation, walkability, sustainable sites, brownfield sites, reuse. Water efficiency is just like it sounds. Energy and atmosphere has a lot to do with the mechanical systems of a building, which is not my expertise, but is a huge part of the scope of LEED. And so mechanical engineering becomes an incredibly important partner in any process under LEED or sustainable design in general when it comes to buildings. Indoor environmental quality. I'm going to move all of the people around too. Just going to minimize that. Actually, it might make it easier for me on my screen. Sorry about that. And then innovation. Innovation is this broad category, which really is a forward-thinking approach, I think, under LEED, which allows people to sort of invent or rethink the ways that sustainability, green building can be pursued and promoted through the building work. And then under each of those, there are prerequisites and credits, which is very similar to the academic world. Prerequisites are necessary. Those have to be achieved for LEED certification. They're a non-starter if they're not achieved. And then there are credits beyond that allow you to achieve certain tiers of LEED certification, whether it's just certification, silver, gold, etc. So diving in a little bit, this is a project we were just talking about actually before we got started this morning, and maybe you've driven by it. This is at the West Shore Mall in the Holland area, just north of town. And we are working with Grand Rapids Community College on what they're calling their GRCC Lakeshore campus. They have purchased the J.C. Penney building, which you can see right there, which has been vacant when J.C. Penney left the mall. And it is in the process of transforming right now, it's under construction, into a new campus for their use. It's going to support a lot of trade type programs, welding and metal work, and as all lab type programs, academic programs, etc. So it's a multi-use function, and we're in the process of transforming that project with them. I like to include guiding principles. This is something that we use with all of our projects pretty much, this idea of guiding principles. Create a welcoming student experience, encourage agile education, and provide a full campus experience. So the idea is that they want this to be identifiable as part of GRCC, reveal and promote GRCC identity within the Lakeshore community, and be sustainable. So that idea of sustainability was right in our fundamental guiding principles. So we used 4 succinct principles to guide the whole project, and sustainability was one of those. And with that, formally pursuing LEED certification. So diving into some design strategies, we have some renderings here. Again, like I mentioned, it's under construction, so we don't have finished photography yet to share. But this gives you a sense of the transformation of the building. So we're going from, a very opaque, enclosed, controlled, mall retail-like environment to something that is much more open, much more engaging of the natural environment, of the outdoors, sunlight, etc. And so for the sake of time, I don't want to dwell on all my bullet points, but I do like to include, maybe just for your perusal, just some of the points that are maybe more specific or literal to the measures that LEED would use. And so as we go through this one, again, this one is pursuing formal LEED certification. We are striving for silver and hope to achieve that. But you can see very much a lot of reuse of the existing building shell in site. We are trying to reduce parking, and we are trying to introduce some green and some outdoor learning and gathering spaces as well. We've perforated a lot of the exterior envelope, trying to preserve the structural integrity of the building, but introduce, this has great exposure from the east, the south, and the west, and has a real opportunity for bringing daylight into the project. And as you might imagine with the JCPenney, maybe you've been in this building, it's a very deep footprint. So getting natural light to sort of be able to reach deeper into the floor plate is an important piece of that. And as part of that as well, you might see on top of the roof, we are puncturing in, puncturing is probably the wrong word, surgically inserting some skylights to help bring natural light deeper into that footprint. With natural light, though, we do want to offer sun shading. We're also using things like translucent glass, etc., so that we're mitigating glare. In the end, this needs to function well for education and for learning. So we want the daylight, but we don't necessarily want the glare and those sorts of things, which can be prevalent when we're talking about southern, western type exposures. And as I mentioned, we create that outdoor space. You can maybe see it in this rendering here. So whereas before it was just a very narrow curb line, lots of parking, and then the building facade, we're trying to modulate in a softer way between interior space and really usable exterior space, usable beyond the car. Moving inside, design strategies, interiors are a very important part of the environment. This includes mechanical systems as well. You hopefully can see in the renderings, we are leveraging a big part of the existing shell of the building as part of the finished aesthetic. Again, we're trying to not only be resilient in terms of our material choices, that is important from a LEED and sustainability standpoint in terms of what we call resilience or durability, right? We don't want to overuse cleaning chemicals. We don't want to have an overabundance of maintenance demand because that uses resources as well when we think about life cycle. But we also want to just make the necessary insertions to support GRC's program and really nothing more than that. So that, again, we're trying to be really diligent in the materials and the resources that we use. Just on the bullet points on the left, I won't go through them all. Those are a number of the kinds of certifications for material choices, interior finishes that we would seek in the products that we would specify and install in our work in order to achieve the spirit of LEED. So some of the behind the scenes sort of administration of achieving LEED, I'll touch on briefly. Owner project requirements is a big one of that. And that's really where our guiding principles that I talked about earlier stem from. We, these are the key points that are under an owner project requirement, and it comes together in a document, a report, and that really outlines for the owner and for us as a design team what we want to achieve to put our best foot forward in being successful in achieving LEED certification and ultimately delivering the project that the owner wants to see for their success, their purpose, and their vision. So I won't dwell on this. This is outside my expertise. I always say I only play a mechanical engineer on TV. I'm not one in reality. So, but what I do want to stress at this point is mechanical systems, mechanical engineering, and I would really go farther to say mechanical and electrical engineering are a huge part of how we're successful in the broader idea of providing sustainable buildings for our clients, but also achieving more specifically LEED. So I don't want to undervalue those partners that we have as architects because it's not just about architecture in achieving success. So as I talked about that first bullet point way at the beginning under the BDC or the IDC program, integrative design is sort of that first bullet point, and that is very critical, and it's sort of appropriate that that's the first point. So I just wanted to show for some context, this is our LEED certification. We happen to be doing ID and C commercial interiors for this particular project. The interior development of the project is such a substantial part of the scope that made sense for the specific LEED program to pursue in this project. And so you can see the way this basically breaks down, I won't dwell on it, is you have points that you're confident you're going to get in green. You have ones that, this project's just not appropriate for those credits, and we need to recognize that. And then the question mark in the yellow are those ones that we've got to do some work there, but we think it's possible to achieve them. And so our goal here is to be in the silver range with that total. So where I'd like to go from there then, I feel like I'm taking a really long time, which I tend to do when I get talking about design. So I'll try to move it along. But what I'd like to do is just touch on a couple of projects then. Again, these are both in the Holland area. Maybe you've been to them or you've seen them. But what we find really valuable about LEED, about sustainability, about green building in our practice is the day-to-day impact of how it shapes design decisions that we make. And so the reality is pursuing LEED certification formally for the award and the recognition and those sorts of benefits associated with the program, that's really the minority of our work. We've got about maybe pushing 50 projects in our 50 years, and really since LEED has existed, that are approaching or have obtained or are seeking LEED certification, which in the total realm of all the projects we've done is pretty small. But the impact of the thought process, the design strategies, the techniques that we use, the materials and systems we implement are really a part of our day-to-day piece. And these projects exist in that realm. So this is the Patricia L. Dean Education Center at the Outdoor Discovery Center, south of Holland. Travis Williams and his group have wonderful program there and grounds. And the reason I think this one's unique and I thought was worth sharing is maybe it's a little bit of a different spin on the importance of sustainability. And what drives this one is because the ground is really pretty sacred. They've got a wonderful set of property there. We really wanted to tread very lightly with this program on their property. And so the idea of sustainability, not only is it critical to them and their program, with the watershed programs and everything that they're leading, but it was important that we not adversely affect the sort of beauty and the natural quality of the site there. And so that really drove everything about this project. So this is a preschool. Education is a huge part of the work we do. And so just some pieces. So this one did not go for LEED certification, but hopefully the strategies will be very evident. So this project actually was built on the grounds of an existing building. The building to the left that you see here, that was the existing preschool. It's a house. And we built this new building, and there was an existing storage structure here too. So a number of pieces of infrastructure that would support a building, plumbing, electrical, those sorts of things were already feeding to this site. And we were able to take that building down and build in its place. The parking lot, we didn't do anything to expand parking. We wanted to keep that compact. This is a program, this is an organization that is all about the green space and all about the natural environment. So our building was really intended to be deferential to the outdoor space. And you can even see in this view, the outdoor space is really what we call the primary classroom. Our building is really intended to be support. Just some more pieces associated with that. So again, I'm using this language of indoor environmental quality, et cetera. This is LEED language. So again, I just want to offer some structure to how we made decisions about this project and try to connect how the idea of LEED, the spirit of LEED, becomes a broader part of how we design in our industry. So just a little bit of, this was an early hand sketch about how natural light and views were important to the classrooms. Here's what a classroom is like. This faces south. So again, trying to capture that daylight in. These are large rooms. The idea of resilient materials, low VOC materials. Acoustics is very important. They spend a lot of time outdoors, so these rooms can get messy. We wanted a lot of hard surface materials, but a lot of hard surface materials like drywall, and you can see polished concrete floors. Those can cause problems for this functioning as a classroom day to day for acoustics. So we treated the ceiling, made some other treatments with other amenities within the space to try to mitigate that sound and make them viable. So when we talk about indoor environmental quality, the quality of the experience of the space is just as important as what is the quality of the materials you picked and what is their harm to the world or to the earth. So it's pretty holistic. As we talk about innovation, I mentioned it at the beginning, celebrating nature is a huge part of this project. So under the category of innovation, it's pretty broad what LEED offers in terms of what might be considered innovative with green building projects, which is pretty awesome. I think that for me, that's a big part of its viability is sort of the open-mindedness to the possibilities of how sustainability and green building gets promoted and gets executed. And so we've done things like we've got big rain scuppers, and this is a rain garden. So, and then the shape of the roof, we talk about it as being like a butterfly. So there's a natural metaphor there, and collecting the water and expressively sort of draining that water and bringing it down to the site. So that's part of the education. And you can see outdoor education is a huge part. They spend the majority of their time outdoors as part of this preschool program, which is really awesome all year long. Their mantra is there is no bad weather, only bad clothing. So it's a really wonderful program. The other one, which maybe you've seen, this is very close to downtown Holland. This is the Civic Center project completed maybe a couple of years ago now. And this one, again, we didn't pursue formal certification, but very much these ideas were a part of what drove the design. So similarly, maybe to the Pennies, this was a very traditional arena. I think a very beautiful building, which made our challenge really a big lift, is that we wanted to respect the existing arena, the existing traditional civic center design, because it's such a strong building and such an important fixture to the community. But we wanted to sort of turn it inside out, as we've referred to it, which similar to the JCPenney, maybe we want this to be a more open, welcoming, multi-use type facility versus the inward focused, traditional, more opaque arena, but yet very much embrace the original clear geometric architecture of the building. All of these ideas, and again, the bullet points I've included on the slide are intended to communicate this. All of these ideas and strategies of how we made design decisions very much stem from the spirit of LEED when it comes to location and transportation or sustainable sites, very much trying to embrace existing parking locations, respect the market, which is right next door on the extension of 8th Street, Bring the outdoors in is a big part in the, so this used to be the old lobby. And if you remember right where, if you've ever been in that building or recall, it was a 1-story, very opaque. The Civic Center sign was on the outside of the building. We've opened it up, expanded it. We call this the Civic Center living room, the community living room. Material reuse was really huge in this project. So you could see we put a fireplace in the living room. A living room should have a fireplace. So we put a fireplace in there. And we put some other seating in there for gathering. And we certainly hope to get back to these points in our world when people can gather in this way and be together physically. But what we did is these are all of the bleachers from the old Civic Center that were taken down. A lot of those were purchased and sold for fundraising for the project, and we saved a certain percentage to be able to reuse in the building to keep that legacy of the original Civic Center as part of the program. Not only to mention, sort of in this spirit of LEED, the reuse of materials rather than it going to landfill or the other pieces. So this actually is a wonderful story. We did this Civic Center legacy wall, as we call it, which is interchangeable signs for the history of things that have occurred at the Civic Center. And the wood fixture that you see there actually was found under the parking lot where we dug up for the extensions of the building. It's the old tannery wood floor. There was a tannery on this site even before the Civic Center, and that wood floor was under the asphalt. And so we dug it up, and it was viable. We were able to clean it up. And we actually ended up using, we had a different strategy for that sort of fixture, and it immediately, we shifted gears and said, we've got to use that material. It's a wonderful reuse. It's a wonderful story. And what a great second life for that material to find it. And it cleaned up great and became a wonderful backdrop for that legacy wall. Getting the most out of spaces so that we're building the least amount of square footage possible is important. The Civic Center, the city, had really grand aspirations for all of the kind of features beyond what they were already doing with the original Civic Center and how they wanted to support different types of events. But we wanted to make sure we were only building what we needed to. Again, we want to be careful with our overall resources, how much of the land we're using, how much new material we're employing. So getting the most out of these spaces. I apologize, this photograph cropped funny, but it was the idea that this is really a multi-use space. Yep, basketball still happens there. Holland Christian plays there. But also it's used for professional functions, events, performances, concerts. Same with this new market. This is an indoor market. So now they have the ability to engage the market year round by bringing parts of it indoors. But it also has the ability to also become a more formal space for dinners, other types of meetings. Oop. So just some takeaways I want to offer. Start at the beginning. That seems obvious, but whether it's LEED formally or you're considering green building or sustainable measures, it's really important that those become a fundamental part of the conversation at the early concepts of a project. Integrate the design strategies and systems. I don't feel like I can stress that one enough. We benefit from being a full service firm. So we have all of those other disciplines and engineering in-house, which makes this integration really nice and fluid. Think long-term. It's not just about the benefit in the moment, but it's also about life cycle cost. Seek impact beyond certification. Hopefully these later projects I shared are some examples of that that resonate. Embed the ideas into every practice. That's ultimately, I think, the benefit of sustainability, of LEED. The world doesn't, or the earth doesn't care as much about whether we get certification or the award, but it does care about the strategies and the tactics that we use to try to preserve our environment. And be creative. That's the wonderful thing about this thing too, and has really added another dimension to our design practice, is how do we be creative about sustainability? Just some things that are next for LEED. This, I think, just came about in the spring. You know, it's hard not to talk about COVID these days. But LEED is also trying to stay at the forefront of how their scope responds to what is happening in our environment right now. And so these are just some pilot credits are a big part of what LEED does. And these pilot credits are how they continue to innovate within the idea of LEED in what you can achieve. And so these are just some that are come about more recently as we think about going back into our places of business or going back into our schools or our facilities. What can we do to go above and beyond and make sure we're doing the right things? So how are we leading? A little just quickly about GMB. So we have 27 LEED accredited professionals in our office. We take it seriously. I mentioned the benefit of being a multidisciplinary practice, especially when you're trying to really execute sustainable practices on your projects. We have nearly 50 LEED certified projects, and we have developed both a sustainability and building science team. So sustainability team is really holistic. What does sustainability holistically mean in terms of the services and the designs we provide? Building science is drilling down from that. That's things like commissioning and mechanical systems, and how do we test long term? How do we help our clients long term make sure that what we designed early on is consistently performing? So that one really drills down a little deeper. Just a few pieces of info. The USGBC, which is the organizer of LEED, is usgbc.org. Green Business Certification Inc., GBCI, that's really the arm that is more focused on the accreditation of professionals, examination, continuing education, that sort of thing. And then that's our website, gmb.com. So thank you. I do feel like I ran long when I said I wouldn't, but I welcome any questions.
Okay, I have a few here in the chat. So let's see if I can combine some of them. There's a question about handling sound dampening with all the hard surfaces, and specifically in the Outdoor Discovery Center classrooms. What materials did you use for sound mitigation?
Yeah, so we used an acoustical product on the ceiling in between all of the trusses. That was a big help. Also, one of the things that we've employed throughout those classrooms, for example, are outdoor rugs. So they're outdoor from the standpoint of they need to be cleaned easily because there's a lot of mud and things coming in. The students spend a lot of time outside, but they also do provide an opportunity for kids to sit on the floor and that sort of thing. And then a side effect of those is it gives us some acoustical value at the floor as well. It's certainly not the acoustical performance of like fully carpeted, plush seats in the room, complete lay-in acoustical ceiling, but the driver of durability and resilience to connecting with the outdoors was a more important priority than the acoustics. So we did what we could from there to provide the best acoustical experience.
Okay, thanks. And then let's see, a question about solar panels. There's a couple actually. One, why are there no solar panels on the GRCC building? And then do you build passive solar and or solar panels into most buildings? If no, why not?
Yeah, great question. I meant to touch on that. So the quick answer is there are not solar panels planned initially for the GRCC building. I believe with that project, though, we have put in the infrastructure electrically such that those systems can be added in the future. One of the difficulties with the GRCC project specifically is that the structure for the roof, when it was a JCPenney, or when it was first engineered as a JCPenney, is engineered to the most efficient structural system. So any loading additional on the roof demands additional structure. And so we've elected not to take that on at this point. I suspect with that project, if solar was pursued, we might look at like a ground mounted version. If additional parking area can be taken up or that sort of thing. Nick is familiar certainly with the larger idea of that whole complex and its PUD. So, but that was part of the dialogue, but is not being executed. The Civic Center, however, that is fully engineered to receive solar. And in fact, we pursued solar on that project for quite a while in the design idea. There's an organization in West Michigan that has programs for helping with the financing and the payback and the lease back and a lot of financial details that I don't understand myself. But so the new roofs at the Civic Center for the market space and the what I referred to as the living room to the east, those are fully engineered for solar panels, and the electrical systems are in place so that they're sort of almost plug and play when it does make sense to add them.
Okay, I'm going to save some of the questions that I'm getting for the end, but maybe quickly, can you answer if in the building structure at Outdoor Discovery Center, did you consider engineering overhangs on the south side to allow sunlight indoors during winter and block sun rays from entering indoors during the summer?
Yeah, so if I go back, yeah, we think we've done that well. There are a multitude of ways to do it, but that is the south elevation. So we've got the deepest overhangs that way, so that when the sun is really high, this does shade the upper windows and works in tandem with this lower trellis. But when the sun is lower in the wintertime, that sun is allowed to come in deeper into the space. So that was our strategy. I think there are a multitude of ways of trying to achieve that, but that was our strategy for that project.
Awesome, thanks. I'll save the rest for later. Bill, why don't you go ahead and introduce Kara?
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Dan. Kara Slater has held leadership positions in facilities management at Hope College since 2015. She's currently Director of Operations. Before joining Hope, she was a project manager for GDK Construction for 21 years and has served in this role for Holland's City Flats Hotel, the first hotel in the Midwest to earn LEED Gold certification. She has a BA from Calvin University and is a LEED accredited professional.
Thank you, Bill. And thanks, Dan, for that great overview of LEED and what's going on in town. So I appreciate that. I've been asked today to kind of go over what Hope College is doing with LEED buildings and the impact it's having on campus. And hopefully this works. Get my screen to, there we go. Okay, so the history of LEED at Hope. Around 2008, there was a faculty and staff initiative that ended up with a directive from President Boltman to do more with sustainability on campus. And there had been a surge in public interest in sustainability, and Hope was getting really low points in some of the university scoring systems. And we wanted to just do better on that. And that's a whole other topic of sustainability on campus. But one of the outcomes of that committee was a recommendation that all major new buildings on campus be LEED certified. So since that time, we've constructed 3 major facilities that are LEED certified: the Jack H. Miller Center for Musical Arts, the Jim and Marty Boltman Student Center, and the Van Andel Heister Hope, which is our new campus ministries building. And I'm going to run through each of those, tell you a little bit about what we did to get certified, and then talk a little bit about the impact on campus. So the Jack Miller Musical Building, we opened that in 2016, was fully open. It's certified silver, which was 54 out of 107 points. That was actually a really complicated project. It's a little bit my baby because it was the last construction project I did before I started working for Hope. So I kind of know that building inside and out, and it was a really fun one to do. But it was a complicated project in that Hope wanted a world-class music building and then wanted it right next to a train track. So we wanted to sit inside the auditorium and have it dead quiet so you can hear somebody speak on stage without the use of amplification, but yet didn't want to hear the train go by. So, and my office is right behind this building, and I can tell you, the train goes by a lot. So to do that, we used a lot of concrete, a lot of acoustics, but then adding lead on top of that just added another level of complication, but that's what makes it a fun project. So some of the attributes, as Dan was saying, a whole lot of LEED certification is tied to the electrical and HVAC systems. Unfortunately, that's kind of boring to talk about, and it doesn't make for good pictures. But so I'm going to go through some of the things that you can see when you walk through, but know that especially in this building, a huge part of the accreditation was the HVAC system. And to add that complication, a music building HVAC system is another layer of complication because of the humidity. So we have 2 major organs in the building, plus 3 other smaller ones. There's over 68 pianos in the building, and it was really key to keep humidity at a constant level in that building to keep everything in tune. But other attributes, so daylight harvesting, if you've ever been in that lobby during the day, it's just beautiful to hang out there. One thing that surprised us about the building is the students love to hang out there, and especially in this lobby. And so a lot of that was due to this, you almost feel like you're sitting outside. On the south side, you may not realize this, the mirrors are auto dimming. So that's a technology out of Jenison, originally Pleotint. Now I think they call it Suntuitive. But those windows will dim as the sun hits them. So these are all of the offices. So that reduces heat gain. One of the innovation points, you'll remember Dan talked about that. One of the innovation points we got on this building was a really high level of local products. And that's commendable to West Michigan. So over 55% of the construction material on that project came from within a 500-mile radius of the job site. And we have so many great manufacturers in the area. This picture here is of all of the instrument lockers, and those are all made by Fleetwood here in Holland. The woodwork came out of Grand Rapids in Zealand. A big part of this project was concrete, and that all came from Kirkstra. So it was just really neat to, when at the end of the project, when we pulled all the numbers together, what a high percentage we had that was local. As I mentioned, the high recycled content, this is one of my favorite projects, favorite pictures from the project. This is a drone photo of them pouring a foot of concrete on the roof of the concert hall. And that was really done for acoustics. So the walls in the building are 15 inches thick solid concrete, and then the roof is a foot thick solid concrete. What that does for LEED is it's a huge recycled content, because a lot of on the LEED recycling points, it's all based on weight. So concrete has a lot of recycled material and heavy recycled material. So that really helped our recycled content on the project. But overall, the entire project has over 30% recycled content in it, construction material. I think that's all I had for, yeah, thought I had one more, sorry. Thought I had one more slide, but I'll keep going. Jim and Marty Boltman, that one opened in 2017. It's certified gold. It was a little easier to get the gold certification on that because of the HVAC system. We got a lot more points on that without that humidity component. So that helped us out on that project. So we had 65 out of 107 points. The attributes on that site selection, if you haven't walked through the center of campus since this building, this is right dead center. And it's where the old Nykirk Music Building used to be. So LEED really likes it when you don't take existing green space, but you reuse a space. So we tore down the Nykirk building and then just built this building, which is a little bit larger footprint, but actually not a whole lot larger. And so we left the green space almost the same. You'll also notice on this one, we have a lighter roof. That's another point you get. So that's why the shingles on there are such a light color. Daylighting and views. This building, you can walk through it and you almost feel like you're outside. It's one of my favorite places to be in the winter, especially because it's warm, but everywhere you look, you can see outside. And LEED really pushes that. They want everybody in the building to be able to have a look out a window. Again, some daylighting, daylight harvesting really minimizes the use of electrical lighting. And the students just, it's a lot nicer to sit next to a window than to sit underneath a light bulb. Stormwater containment was a big deal on this project. It's also a city requirement to keep in the downtown area, to keep all of your stormwater on site. And that's something Hope has been focusing a lot on. If you'll remember, we had a big flood in 2019 where quite a few of our buildings had water on the lower levels. One main reason for that is because the city storm system in this area just gets overwhelmed. So if you ever drive through in a heavy rain, the streets get flooded quite quickly. And so in 2009, the streets backed up onto campus and flooded a lot of buildings. So to try and alleviate some of that, especially on campus, we've been doing a lot of stormwater mitigation. All of our new parking lots are pervious pavement. We've been putting in a lot of pervious paver sidewalks. So the beauty is we're on sand, so water leaches quite easily. We just got to minimize the hard surface. In this case, the stormwater containment is all buried underground. And when it's kind of hard to see from this project, but it's almost like milk crates that are all buried, and all the water goes in there, gets filtered out into the groundwater. We monitor it to make sure it's not getting too full, and we haven't had any trouble at all. So that system is working really well. Reclaimed wood in this project. We had saved trees. I forget what year that storm was, but when we had those straight line winds, some of you'll remember, we had quite a few trees go down around campus, and we saved the older trees, and then we had that wood kiln dried and milled and used. And this is the chapel in the building. This is actually elm. So from an old elm tree on campus, which is really unusual. The mill workers, when I was talking to the carpenters on site, I said, have you ever built anything with elm before? And that was a new one to everybody. So we were like, is it a hardwood? Is it a softwood? But that's what elm looks like. Indoor air quality, huge thing on LEED. And as in the past few months, I can appreciate even more, because our LEED buildings on campus, I didn't have to worry about indoor air quality. We're getting the air exchanges that are recommended, and it just, the controls there were set up for this already. So that was great news. But other things with indoor air quality would be really cleanable surfaces. So you don't have carpet that's getting all gross and dirty all the time. It's all low or no VOC material and paint. We also did air flush in this building, and cleaning all the ductwork before occupancy. Building education was a innovation point. So we had students design signs in the building that if you walk around, it'll tell you what we did to get LEED certification on this project. So it's kind of a fun scavenger hunt. And then the Van Andel Heister Hope, which is our new campus ministries building. And if you haven't been through that one, once we unlock all the buildings after COVID again, you really should walk through it. It turned out really beautiful. This was opened in 2019, and it's one of the first LEED version 4 buildings in Michigan. And ever since I got my LEED accreditation, they keep making it harder. So there was the 2009 and then 2019, then they switched from the years and called it version 4. So it's harder and harder, and Nick might talk a little bit about this too, I don't know, but to get certification. And so this project, we only got certified. We didn't get silver or gold. And it's also a fairly small project, so the opportunities are harder to get that those points. And the things we did on it, Again, daylighting and views. It's a beautiful space to be in. Everywhere you go, you can see outside. Indoor air quality. I took this, I added this picture so a little bit during construction. One of the things that's required during construction in LEED projects is that the HVAC contractor covers up all the ductwork before it gets installed. So often before LEED or non-LEED projects, this ductwork will just sit there getting full of dust before it gets installed. Now, that's one of the things they're required to do and document that they protected it. Building envelope on this project was a huge deal. That was one of the places we were able to gain some points. So a lot of insulation and air barriers to increase energy performance of the building. Land use, I don't know if any of you will remember, but we moved this building. There were two old cottages, we call them. It's a nice word for old houses, on the site. And so we reused a site where two of the houses were, and one of them was this Freed cottage, a beautiful old brick house that we really didn't want to tear down. It has a lot of history on campus. It was used as an alumni house. It was used for our international center. And then most recently, it was used to house international students. And so we decided we were going to move this building. It's right now on the corner of 14th and Columbia. But so we got some extra points on this because this was a major recycle and reusing. And that was just really fun. That was probably the hardest part about the project, was moving this building, because the more we studied it, the heavier we found out it was. But this was really cool. Inside the building, as we went to clean it up after we moved it, we said, well, we think there's a door going into the dining room here. So we took out some drywall and we found these original oak slider doors, and had the original hardware, all of the functioning hardware. They worked perfectly. They were just gorgeous. So we opened those up again and told the students that they better not wreck them because they're gorgeous. So real quick, I'll run through some results that we found on campus. Since 2005, and I know my chart only goes through 2017, but campus square footage under roof has increased over 18%, but our greenhouse gas emissions are down 31%. So that's something that we track every year for a report we have to give. And so we're really excited about our trend on that. And it's not just due to these LEED buildings, it's due to a lot of improvements we've been making on campus, but we want to keep getting that greenhouse gas inventory down. Energy savings. DeWitt Cultural Center, which is where the DeWitt Theater is and the bookstore, that costs us about $1.57 a square foot in electrical. So I just kind of threw these in for comparison. You can see the big difference. Jack Miller Music, you would think is going to cost a whole lot because of that HVAC system, and it actually costs less. So that's one of the things that are really spurring us on to continue to do these, whether their projects are certified or not, but at least to take that technology that we're using in the new buildings and keep doing it just because of the payback. One of the points we first tried to get on Jack Miller and achieved was green cleaning. And once we started looking into that, we loved it so much, we implemented that all across campus. So our cleaning products on campus, the guy in charge of our supplies says he can drink it if he wants. I wouldn't advise it, but it is eco-friendly chemicals we're using. I personally like it a lot better for our team. They're not breathing in these terrible chemicals every day. So we implemented that. Reusable rags, which was a big deal. You'd be surprised what a big deal that was, but we started doing that. LED lighting has become really big on campus. We retrofitted the DeVos Field House with a 2-year payback on that, and DeWitt Tennis Facility also we retrofitted. Just this past week, we're changing out all of our residence halls on the south side of campus to LED lighting. We have people in there doing that this week. Indoor air quality has become a bigger deal to us. We look at it a lot more with our flooring selections and with our painting products. And then recycling has become a big deal on campus, both with our students and the faculty and staff, and more interest in that. But I would say the number one thing the LEED projects have given us is user satisfaction. And they're just nicer buildings to be in because everything is thought out so much more. The daylighting and views, the HVAC system, I hardly ever get complaints about being too hot or too cold in any of these buildings. It's just a place that people like to be. And so I see that is the main result of why we would continue to do the LEED philosophy on campus. So that is all I got. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Cara. So exciting. I mean, I knew Hope was doing a lot of this, but this is awesome to see all at one time. One question maybe, and I think I'll save the rest for the end, but is there any use of passive solar with all of the daylight harvesting that's happening?
So I guess depending on what you're referring to as passive solar. So the daylight harvesting passive solar, yes, it does help, especially in the winter with HVAC systems. It'll bring in some heat. It's used a lot to cut down on lighting. Solar systems in general, we have been trying to make that work on campus. About every other year, we dig into it some more. We've worked with outside companies. Part of the problem with solar in Holland is that BPW rates are crazy cheap, and it's really hard to make it work. Last time we looked into it was probably about 2 years ago, and it was a 20-year payback to put solar panels on DeWitt Tennis was the specific one we looked at, and we just can't justify it. But all that being said, there's engineering students who this year have come up with a solar design. The solar panels just got delivered yesterday. So we're doing a really mini solar project to charge our golf carts that are used on campus are now going to be charged via solar panels.
Cool. Also, do you capture the heat in the flooring?
Capture the heat in the flooring?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Okay.
We haven't really studied that.
Okay, thanks. All right, I'm going to let Bill introduce Nick, and I'll save some of the rest of these for the end again.
Thank you, Cara. Nick Rolinski serves as project lead at Broad Street Studio in Zealand, which is dedicated to the stewardship and development of classical urbanism. An adjunct professor at Hope College, Nick has also consulted on the Waterfront Holland Design Project and the Holland Charter Township Master Plan. Nick holds a bachelor's degree and master's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Dayton and a master's degree in architecture from the University of Notre Dame.
All right. Can everybody hear me? Okay, I see Dan nodding. Thank you, Dan. So thank you both, Dan and Cara, for walking us through all of this awesome content, these work examples that have a lot of holistic features to them, which satisfy LEED scorecard requirements at times, and other times, like Cara alluded to, and like Dan also mentioned with Little Hawks, are just the right thing to do. And so there's a broader, holistic kind of mindset which has become a bit of a norm within the design community, whether LEED is incorporated in the project or not. And so the key there is being holistic. And so that's very encouraging for people of younger generations to understand that the direction of design, the philosophies of design are taking a much more holistic approach to things. And in that spirit, I'm going to talk about actually not as much about LEED in particular, but talk about other considerations which might be thought of as in addition to some of the building science, building technology considerations that help a project be more holistic in its role as serving a community or a place. I'm starting with a couple of different reading list items here, as well as a couple of podcasts they're not directly related to LEED, and in fact, they're more related to architectural philosophies in general, but they do relate to sustainability. And they take a slightly different approach to sustainability and offer lots of things that we might not typically think of when we think of the word sustainability. So there's 2 links up here, and I've talked to Sarah, and Sarah's going to share this with the group if people are interested to get started on these. And these are sort of gateway podcasts, perhaps, into a community of designers and thinkers that are interested in some of the more passive and maybe some of the more ancient wisdom that has to do with sustainability. So the first one is with the author of this book here, Steve Mouzon. And the second one is with a person named James Kunstler, who's a little bit, I have to say, he's a little bit more, he's something of a cultural critic and a bit of a firebrand. He can be abrasive. So there's fair warning there for you, but he's got a lot of wisdom that he brings to the table when it comes to these things too. So I included it. But these books are really great kind of starters as well. The best starter is this one on the left, the original green. It's written very much in the voice of a lay, it's written by an architect, but it's written absolutely for the layperson to really navigate a lot of keys to sustainability in everyday life, in everyday buildings, as well as the big public buildings. And it's an easy read, and just all kinds of cleverness and, like I said, kind of ancient wisdom being uncovered as Steve goes through a ongoing exercise of what he calls pattern recognition, which is a really important key that I'm gonna hit on throughout. But pattern recognition being this thing where you walk through a place that has a distinct and unique climate, unique to it, a distinct and unique palette of building materials that might be local, whether that's really good clay for firing bricks or fieldstone supply that happens to be in the fields, or stone that can be quarried, stands of timber that's readily available, and so on, which dictate the form of buildings if we were going to be building with very low tech means. And low tech is not always such a bad thing, because there's an inherent sustainability that comes with building small, building within our means, building with techniques that don't require materials to come 1,500 miles on a semi-truck. Kara and Dan both alluded to reclaiming local materials. And also the cultivation of local craft and local abilities and wherewithal to do these things at a level that is really accessible to many within the community, rather than just the specialists or just the big firms, not just design firms, but the big construction entities that do the big public buildings and projects that we all love. But being able to have locally some competence around doing our own homes or doing small commercial projects and so on. Strong Towns is actually Strong Towns and Walkable City both kind of take that into the realm of the community and the scale of the community. And they get a little bit more technical, I would say. And so I wouldn't just recommend these to just sit down in an armchair and just read for fun, at least not the later chapters in both of these. But I would recommend them as reference materials if you're interested in these topics, especially because as they introduce the topics, they are incredibly articulate in terms of unlocking some of this age-old wisdom that is inherently sustainable. So these guys are Hope students, Hope Senior Design students from a few years ago, I want to say 2018. And their senior design project was to try to look at the energy systems that were involved in the restoration of this 1840s Greek revival farmstead down in Coldwater, down at the state line. And so they looked at everything from solar to HVAC, efficient HVAC systems, and really efficient and cutting edge building envelope technology. But what this particular project also offered was the opportunity to look at some of these low-tech solutions that were incorporated in this particular building from day one. Because in the 19th century, in 1840, when this was really frontier country still, and was being supplied by the canal system that came from the East Coast and came kind of skirting the lower Great Lakes, you needed low tech and you needed to have things within your means. And so this building and its construction reflects the available materials that were in the region, and it reflects the available building methods that would have been something that the homeowner could have taken up along with a team of helpers that might have helped on his home, and then he might have, him and his family might have helped on their projects as well. This home is a heavy timber frame construction with hand-hewn timbers that came from the site, or came at least from a nearby site. And when they showed up and pulled out of the stepped out of the minivan here, the first thing that they were able to notice was the tree cover. It happens to be the case that the house is surrounded by fully mature deciduous trees that guard the house really nicely from summer light, but shed their trees in the fall so that winter light can pass through the trees and hit the house and warm the house. That's very, very low tech, but these trees were strategically planted. Whether the homeowner was totally cognizant or not, that's just what you did with a homestead during this time. And now they got the benefit of the trees being fully mature, but that's a kind of, it's a matter of stewardship where maybe the homeowner isn't going to see the trees fully mature, but it's going to pay off for this property in the long haul. They were able to see the foundation made really of field stones pulled from this property itself, all the way up to, you know, huge 2-3 foot boulders. They were able to notice that this house started really as the smaller bit, with the 2 little eyebrow windows there and the 2 windows and the setback, and that it actually grew incrementally out of that small frontier cabin into a stately homestead that would be befitting of a state senator, which this turned out to be later on in the life of the home. But the idea of phasing and living within one's means and building something that you can actually achieve, and only growing the program when you've acquired the means or built the community around you that can help you raise a larger timber structure, is a sustainability thing. And so again, just to be clear, this house started out as basically a 15 foot by probably 10 foot little cabin. And then it grew actually out to the shaded area that I'm hovering my mouse over only by about 5 feet, probably within 10 years of the first build. And then probably within a few decades of the first build, got this bigger addition. And you can see that the bigger addition is more stately and formal and so on. So there's a trajectory of this family's life that started as a starter home, as probably people in their 20s who had made it out from the East Coast. And as they grew, as their family matured, as their careers matured, they were able to build maybe their forever home, something that the whole family could be proud of and could be a legacy later on. But the phasing is a big part of timber framing allows for that. And in fact, there's evidence on the site that pieces of the timber framing structure were pulled off the house at certain times and rotated and plugged back into the house or used for other things on the site. And so building with materials that's almost like a Lego kit where you can kind of reconfigure and play with the phasing over time so that you're not beholden to other external availability concerns is, again, a sustainability thing. So I'll keep moving here. This next group of, this next house, Cara will recognize. This is the Keppel House on Hope's campus. It's the former home of campus ministry. And Cara's department was really helpful in assisting a senior design group to study this one, an engineering senior design group to study this one. And they did a similar study. They kind of went through Steve Mouzon's pattern recognition exercise and toured streets and blocks within the city of Holland, within the core, and looked at what are some sustainability measures that these early 20th century houses incorporated. And in this case, there's a few that are evident right away. There's durable materials, right? There's brick. Brick is something that can be locally produced. This brick may not have been, but we of course have a tradition of the Veneklassen bricks, which are very much local. This has nice broad overhanging eaves, which help with solar gains into the rooms at certain times of year, similar to how the Little Hawks design functioned that Dan showed. This has outdoor spaces, so when it's sweltering hot in the summertime and you don't have air conditioning running at full blast, you can still step out on the porch, which is effectively a formal living room that's shared with the community, right? So there's all kinds of things that can be ascertained through pattern recognition, just walking down the street and looking at some of this ancient wisdom and trying to catalog it. And so taking a leaf out of kind of the page, a leaf out of the approach of LEED, this senior design group put together their own scorecard that sought to be a little bit more geared towards some of these traditional means and methods, and again, holistic. So they actually used the LEED scorecard as well as several other sources that were very much geared towards the technology, because after all, they were engineering students. But they wove those kinds of parameters in with a few other sustainability metrics. I'm going to try to zoom in on what they regarded as sustainability. And you can see that they break it into this three-way Venn diagram that hits on social, environmental, and economic. And it's interesting to look at some of the things that they're hitting on. Natural resources, threats to the building, engagement with the outdoors, just starting at the bottom left. Occupant engagement, and they flesh that out within the scorecard. Materials, environmental quality, which can include air quality, it can include thermal comfort. So how does the building passively heat and cool itself? It can include lighting techniques, passive lighting techniques. The one here at the top left is interesting, lovability. That comes from the Steve Mouzon book of Original Green. There's something lovable about this building. And if it weren't so lovable, Kara's group might have an easier time taking a wrecking ball to it, right? But it is very lovable. It's something of an icon on campus. It represents our culture. We look at it and we enjoy the beauty of the rafter tails that run along the soffit there, and the formality of the front porch. And we would all hate to see these buildings go away from our culture in exchange for something else. They enrich our culture, and they engage in, I think, a really nice dialogue with the wonderful modern buildings that are being built around town as well. And they offer a nice richness there. And so there's a lovability there that actually, because it's lovable, that lovability actually protects the building. It's a means of protection for the building. Community, durability. So the more durable it is, the more it can endure for a long period of time and not require more materials to be brought to the site. Materials themselves have an energy cost and a carbon footprint to them. Adaptability. So if it's only geared for one thing, and then that thing moves on, even if it's lovable, it's hard for a facilities department or a community to say, yeah, we got to keep it. We got to find a way to shoehorn some other use into it. But good sustainable buildings have adaptability to them, so that it's easier to make that case that no, we should keep it and we should use it for this other use that would be great in it. Accessibility, efficiency of appliances, and then maintainability. This is huge. We all think that vinyl siding is maintenance free, but what Steve Mouzon talks about in his book is it's not maintenance free. It's actually that you can't do maintenance on it. And so it needs to be replaced once it's aged out of its design life. Whereas something that can be maintained, say the wood pickets on this porch rail, they need to be painted, they need to be maintained, they need to be occasionally swapped out. But with an active maintenance regimen, they can stand the test of time. The maintenance expectation's a little different than maybe what we're accustomed to or comfortable with now, but there's an ability to actually do active maintenance on these things. And that goes right into sustainability, because if I'm replacing vinyl version of that railing all the time, I'm filling up a landfill, I'm bringing more vinyl to the site. I have to have a vinyl railing manufacturing facility somewhere within my culture that supplies these things at, you know, for every house like it. And these things all have sustainability and climate change impacts to them. So they took this breakdown of sustainability and they made a scorecard that, again, is very similar to the methodology of LEED, but included a few of these things. And I don't want to put down LEED. LEED has a lot of these things in it too, right? So LEED has all of these versions, and LEED is always evolving and incorporates a lot of these things. And what I would say is that these students saw a lot of that and then added a few more pattern recognition items that they were able to glean from the community. So how does this work at the community scale? It goes from the scale of the building to how does the building relate to its broader environs, and what kind of sustainability aspects need to be thought of. And so I've got here two diagrams, and this diagram here is by an architect called Leon Creer. He makes a lot of these little cartoons that kind of get right to the point of some of our community difficulties that I'll say that we have maybe in the 21st century. What he's showing here is the comparison of a city with these really distinct centers, where that's kind of the center of activity, and then rings around it where there's less and less intensity out at the edges, versus a city where there's many centers. Some centers may be more intense than others. But if you're in any of these little areas, these little communities, you have a local center, and that local center may be close enough to walk to. And that local center may, in fact, have a few essential services to it, so that you don't necessarily need to, if you're living in one of these little blocks, you don't need to get in your car and drive to Walmart to pick up something that you can actually get at Minute Mart. If you're familiar with Washington Square here. Washington Square here in Holland is a perfect example of one of these little centers. It does not have everything, but it has a few things that serve people on feet who can actually reach it. And that sphere of people that could conveniently reach something like Washington Square happens to be about a circle with a 1/4 mile walk radius. And so in 1929, there was this diagram drawn up by Clarence Perry, which became kind of an iconic and somewhat controversial diagram within planning and architecture, but shows the neighborhood sort of unit as a cellular unit that builds up into a city, that Leon's diagram kind of shows in its full city scale, and shows how that neighborhood kind of interacts maybe with other neighborhoods and interacts with big thoroughfares like Michigan Avenue or River Avenue, but might have some essential services within it and have that walkability within it. So it shows churches, it shows elementary schools, it shows green space, and then it shows blocks that are just reserved for housing. So you get this mixed use at the level of the neighborhood, which again allows for a sustainability, because now we're not totally car dependent, right? And if you go back to the Keppel House scorecard, one of the things that this Keppel House scores high on is its engagement with the community, its accessibility, and some of those items are actually on the scorecard itself, like this one, stores and schools within walking and biking distance. So the thought being that that scorecard could be used to analyze other houses within the neighborhood as well. So looking at Holland, this slide comes from the Waterfront Holland process, which Dan and I got to work together on. But it shows Holland with that 1/4 mile walking radius. By the way, based on the size of human beings and the length of human legs and the walking gait of a human being, a 1/4 mile happens to be about a 5-minute walk. So these amenities are supposed to be kind of within 5 minutes walking. And you can see that if we were to take kind of the hot spots of activity, the nodes of activity within the city of Holland, we have this very much emerging naturally at the beginning of the 20th century. And the good bones of the core of the city of Holland which includes Hope Campus, which is why it's in orange, actually totally subscribe to this Clarence Perry diagram or this Leon Creer diagram. And so we have an inherent sustainability even within our framework of our community. And you can see that we have different areas that have different things going on. Now, where's that going in terms of our local relevance today? Using that sort of fine-grained urban design methodology that says, let's place mixed uses and essential services and housing and green space all within a walkable little center, amidst the patchwork or the framework of all these little centers together. This methodology has been taken to the Holland Charter Township Master Plan, which was just adopted last month by the Township Board. So now this is official, and it's the master plan for the township. So the about 30 square miles that are north, basically what we think of as the north side. And this particular little neighborhood center is thought of for the federal district, which is actually where the Ditto and the Secretary of State and the Hart and Cooley facility and so on. That's where those things are located now. That a lot of people think that's the city. It happens to be the township. But what that township master plan exercise went through was, how does this become one of those little centers that's actually walkable? How does East 8th Street, which runs east and west here and links up Holland Heights and Hope Campus, how does that all work as kind of a beautiful thoroughfare that knits together walkable fabric on either the north side or the south side, instead of what it is today, which is kind of a forgotten sort of linkage between the highway and downtown. And so you can see the buildings get smaller, they get situated more like the historic core of the city, but that it's not just haphazardly placed, it's actually collected around this neighborhood node, kind of reflective of this idea that you know, these nodes kind of gain intensity as you get towards the middle, and they're all different. So this isn't meant to be another Washington Square. It's going to be different than Washington Square. It's going to have different amenities, which you might travel to access to pay a visit to this neighborhood center, but it might also have some daily use amenities like a grocery or something that these residences would be able to access. Ditto and the Secretary of State could still be there, for instance. Not every little center is going to have the Secretary of State. So it's still going to have, you know, your reasons for visiting this neighborhood center, even if you don't even live there. Now, this is a little aerial perspective of that. And again, this where I'm kind of running my mouse back and forth. This is 8th Street, running east and west, and there's the Hart and Cooley facility. So not demolishing that facility, but kind of incorporating it into this little neighborhood center. Again, with a mindset of sustainability, in that we're bringing proximity to our daily life. Here's the federal school. The name Federal District comes from this little elementary school, this little 1920s brick elementary school, which now is the Ottawa Area Intermediate School District building. It's used for various things, but going back to the idea that, you know, these little centers might have elementary schools, because these little neighborhoods would actually have families in them, right? And so there's a sustainability that has to do with, again, proximity and saying, is it sustainable for every family with elementary school age children to have to load up into a Suburban or a school bus and go someplace that's 6 miles away in a big consolidated school situation? Or should this be more dispersed to the neighborhood level? The same very much goes for churches, right? The development pattern that exists within the city is that these churches are not huge; they're more neighborhood scale, but it's a hop, skip, and a jump away from where you're living if you live in that particular neighborhood. And this is another neighborhood within the township that the master plan studied, and this is what we're calling the Beechwood neighborhood. By the way, both of these neighborhood designs were done by a group called McKenna Associates, but also by myself and in collaboration with another Hope College adjunct professor, Dr. Haryi Khan, who teaches global studies here at Hope. So there were some Hope involvement here, Hope affiliated people involved here. This is the Beechwood area of the township. This is Douglas. Avenue, which goes by DeBoer and goes by Dunton Park and so on. And could this be a neighborhood center that might have a slightly different character, not be exactly like downtown or like the Federal District, but have kind of a waterfront activity orientation to it, and be in some relation to the park and so on. So here's what that could look like. Maybe there's some ecotourism and kind of celebrating the green and the blue, the water that is the delta of the Macatawa River as it meets Lake Mac. So making a sense of place and making a place where you would want to live and also have some amenities there. So at the level of the community, one other thing I would point you to is the Congress of the New Urbanism. And one document, they've got a lot of different documents and guides and so on, but one document is the Canons of Sustainable Architecture and Urbanism. And the first thing that's recognized by that title even of that document is that there's architecture and urbanism or urban scale are really inseparable when it comes to sustainability. You can't have one without the other. Even if a piece of architecture like Little Hawks is out in the country, out in a naturalistic environment, that naturalistic environment has a very important relationship with the urbanism that might be nearby, rather than having more of a suburban sprawl mode where there's an ambiguity as to whether humans are using this land or whether it's being well tended to and whether it's being developed. So this understanding of architecture and urbanism as inseparable is kind of the key foundational thing there. But then they go through, what are the sustainability considerations that incorporate this ancient wisdom that I talked about, a lot of the new and cutting edge wisdom that Dan spoke of, and that has led to the results that Cara has shown us with those cutting edge and innovative buildings. How does that all weave together to be very, very holistic? And I've pulled, this is a 7-page document. I've included the link here. And so it's just kind of an interesting and quick read. And it's kind of like a 10 Commandments type of thing. It's fleshed out a little bit more than that, but it's like just bullet points that have some consideration. And I kind of cherry picked a few things out of here, just to kind of give you a sense of what's in here. Truly sustainable design must be rooted in and evolve from adaptations to local climate, right? So the fact that we are in Michigan will dictate the design of the house or the building. It will have certain responses to our seasonal climate, 4 seasons climate, and so on. Where the light is going to be different times of years. What's good for moisture barriers? What's good for heat absorption? Those kinds of things. Local light, flora, fauna, materials, and human culture. Buildings, neighborhoods, towns, and regions shall serve to maximize social interaction. So that's getting into that sort of neighborhood patchwork. Economic and cultural activities, spiritual development. So again, holistic. How holistic are we going to be when we say holistic? It even includes the sacred realm or the spiritual dimension, right? Because that's important for human flourishing. Humans need that. Energy, creativity, and time. So again, leading to a high quality of life and sustainability. So we regard all of these things as impacting sustainability. The design of streets and the entire right of way, which is basically the sidewalks and stuff, is meant to shape a public realm and encourage shared pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular use. So getting away from a purely car dominated thing, just like Dan showed at the GRCC, and trying to really welcome in the pedestrian or the bicycle. That's really important for sustainability because aside from the 28% of energy that's at end use at the building level, we've got a lot of energy invested in our mobility, right? In our vehicular use. And then the rural to urban transect, which kind of gets at this relationship between a place like Little Hawks in the context of Little Hawks and a place like the city of Holland and their relationship together, provides an essential framework for the organization of the natural, the agricultural, and the urban realms. So we want to have a clear sorting out of what's going to be natural, what's going to be production, agricultural production, and what's going to be urban, and have a real distinct kind of understanding of what's what there. Those are all going to the goal of sustainability. So that's all I've got. looks like I went long too. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. This has been awesome, you guys. It is 11:01, but I'm gonna handle some questions now. So for all of you who can stay on, I will offer some of these questions to our presenters. Let me start with whether or not you feel that you're seeing a rapidly increasing interest in pursuing LEED certification in the Holland area. If so, if any of you have an opinion on why you think that is. And then related to that, a question regarding, is it more expensive to build LEED certified than not? So whoever wants to take that or jump in.
I can speak to the whether it's more expensive. In general, the construction is probably not significantly more expensive. The LEED certification piece can be expensive because to pay somebody for the documentation is really what it comes down to. So quite often you'll find we're putting LEED certification principles to play, but not getting the certification for that reason. And I don't know, maybe Dan can speak more to that.
Yeah, I would echo that same thought, Cara. I think the technical cost increase is more on the administrative side and the involvement and all of the necessary tasks that construction managers or contractors need to do in the field and the paperwork and that sort of thing, more so than investing in the physical construction. I think, you know, as all of us, I think, have talked about on some level, we're making, I think Nick said it well at the end there, or at the start of his, which is this is the right thing to do. And we're seeing that more and more, certainly in our practice, where these are just strategies and things that are a part of every project. And so I think that's what we're seeing. So in terms of, I don't know what the right word is, popularity, or are we seeing it more in the Holland area, that second part, I think we're seeing the strategies more and more, and in some instances we're not even really talking about them, we're just doing them, and so that can sometimes make it harder to identify, well, are we following LEED or not? And in some way, you know, kudos to LEED and other programs where they've made it just part of the intrinsic thought process of how we design our built environment. And you know, I joked before, I'm not sure LEED would appreciate this, but the ideal state for LEED is when they don't need to exist anymore.
Yes.
And so, you know, that's sort of we're seeing more and more of that, where it's just the right thing to do, and it's just what we're doing.
I totally agree, Dan. If LEED is successful, LEED will have changed the culture of building. And if they change the culture of building the way they'd like to, they don't need to exist anymore.
Right.
And so, and the other thing I would tack on relative to expense is, at the scale of a building like Cara might tackle or Dan might tackle, there's a board, right? There's an organization or a company that has to look at cost, of course. But they, you know, one thing our community is really good at is understanding their role as stewards. And so a holistic understanding of stewardship means that you're being a prudent and careful steward of financial resources, but there are other dimensions to stewardship that need to be considered as well. And stewardship of the environment, stewardship of your locality and your place. I don't know that that's the way everybody in the community is currently thinking about things, to go to the question of, is it becoming more or less popular? But I think that'd be a healthy direction to regard that question of the cost benefit analysis to some of these things.
Sure would. Thank you for that. Related to this conversation, question from Bob: do you think LEED certification will be incorporated into local building codes for residential housing?
The local, or the Michigan residential code is has a lot of stipulations and requirements geared around building performance and efficiency. So, you know, maybe the most commonly encountered one is that we used to build with 2x4s for exterior envelope framed buildings. And now we are not allowed to do that based on the local building codes, or actually the Michigan residential code. We have to use 2x6 so that we have a larger, deeper wall cavity for more insulation. We have more stringent R values for our roof systems than we used to. And so, and the same goes for foundation systems, both at the state and the local level. I have had a phone call. I do residential work, and I've had a phone call from the city that, you know, hey, your building permit drawings look good, except for you need more insulation in, you know, this foundation section here. So they're watching very carefully for it, because they're hand in hand with people like the BPW, who want to see good building performance, to make the building stock in general more efficient, and thus easier to serve from an infrastructure standpoint. So all of that stuff is very much kind of, I would say it's modernized. I wouldn't say that I see the residential code taking up a LEED, explicitly LEED affiliation. LEED does have residential scorecards, but it wouldn't be something that the regulators would start to impose under the banner of LEED. It would be more just within the code itself.
Okay, thank you. Question from Alda, this is an interesting one. Do you work with building biologists to be less invasive with EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies, such as Wi-Fi, LED bulbs, etc.?
I don't know that we have any experience there. It's a great question. You know, that is one of those nuances of technology that are, you know, interesting to consider. So I wouldn't say that we have, but it's an interesting question.
Okay, then there's a couple, I think mostly related to the GRCC building, Dan, but one is, are there any plans to use gray water, say from drinking fountains and sinks to flush toilets? Also, well, go ahead and answer that one first. I'm trying to find the other one. Hold on.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd have to check into that. Off the top of my head, I don't believe we are achieving the capacity of gray water for that particular credit, I'll say. But it's an interesting question that I will ask our plumbing engineers, who would be more closely associated with those calculations, and I can follow up. I'd hate to mislead anybody in my answer. So
Okay.
I will make a note of that, and maybe I can send that to Sarah or Bill or you or anybody.
Okay.
You can let me
Sure.
know. But
sure, I could email.
that's
any
another
additional
good question.
information to that. What about solar shaded parking areas? Would that work with the GRCC and other places with parking lots? And then a comment related to that is whether or not bold and bright flashing pedestrian crossing lights, similar to what we have at 9th Street by Hope, if that could be added to the US 31 James Street intersection to promote walkability safety at the GRCC site.
Yeah, I might let Nick speak more to the crossing. He might have more familiarity with those strategies with the larger PUD effort, but I would say specific to the solar panels for shading of parking, that is a viable strategy. I think what Cara mentioned in terms of the research Hope has done relative to solar is spot on, and so it does become a financial decision as well. Although I do appreciate what Nick said as well. He's absolutely right. There's more to stewardship than just financial stewardship, but it is a reality and it is an important one. And so that would be a driver. But as we responding to that question about solar panels earlier on when I was presenting, I would say that is, it seems to me, a viable approach for that particular project, given the fact that the roof, although there is a large amount of roof area, no question, for an old JCPenney big box, the ability for that structure to potentially support additional loading of solar panels. It's not a huge load when you get into the technical nature of it, but it is additional load. That the idea of a solar shading, and there's a double benefit there, because it also helps with heat island and all of those strategies as well that are part of LEED. And so you can get a double benefit. So that can help also with the, not only the story, but even the economic viability of it. There's an example of that close to my home for a rideshare parking lot that has solar panel canopies over it. And so there are even local examples of that. And I
Okay.
put you on the spot, Nick. Sorry, I don't know if you could speak to the
Oh,
flagging or not.
James
But
Street crossing, yeah, that is being thought of. In fact, within the Holland Charter Township Master Plan, which I mentioned had just been adopted, they looked at the two districts that I showed, and those were both, by the way, very just exploratory. Those aren't, those aren't going to happen next year or anything like that. But the third district that they looked at was the US 31 corridor. And one of the things they looked at was how do we facilitate safe crossing at these key thoroughfares like James, Riley, Felch. And that crossing falls outside of the overall West Shore Mall master plan, but it's very much on the minds of the township board when it comes, and the planning staff there when it comes to, okay, we're going to have a college campus here now. And we're going to have probably, by the way, some new housing and some new other amenities going on at West Shore Mall. How do we connect our community to that, in particular for pedestrians? And so there it may be a flashing light type of crossing like you see on 9th Street. That was how the question was asked. It may be something else, but it's on the radar.
Great, thanks. There's a comment about sometimes people can find LEED certified buildings not quite as welcoming or comfortable. And the question is part of the reason for the silver LEED goal for the reuse of the JCPenney's building due to the 1980s building infrastructure, its bones are pre-LEED goals?
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand the question. Is it an aesthetic question or is it, I want to make sure I
Sure, let me
answer it
start from the
properly.
beginning.
Sure.
She says, part of the challenge for LEED is making the built environment welcoming and comfortable for people. A lot of people can feel that it's sort of cold or something like that when first experiencing it. So it's part of the reason for silver LEED goal for reuse of pennies due to the 1980s building infrastructure. That's all I've got.
Okay. Well, I do my best. In terms of warm and welcoming, I fully recognize that there's probably a lot of ways that can be defined or measured. We think the success of the project that's under construction is the bigger moves of opening up the facade, glass area, etc. We did make a conscious decision as a design team and as an owner team to embrace the sort of geometric, simple box construction of the existing building. Number one, that did make financial sense. But number two, we also think that just in terms of the resources used and the way we touch the building, we probably we're getting close to a point where it would have just made more sense to take it down and do something entirely new, which didn't feel like the right answer to our client or to us. And so there was a decision to embrace the old structure. And, we recognize there's a lot of benefits to that in terms of the bones and what it gave us to use for the new programming. And I suppose, everybody can also decide whether or not they like the solution or not. But we think it's going to be quite successful. I hope that answered the question, but I welcome any follow-up.
I think so. Thanks. I will double check if I got everything, but if anybody that's still on would like to unmute themselves and ask a question or make a comment, please feel free to do so now.
Well, I'd like to thank the panelists They've been a pleasure to work with. I found today's presentation fascinating and well presented and intelligent, and real tribute to them and to their expertise.
Agreed. And I'm going through the questions. I don't think I missed anything. So this was awesome. You guys are brilliant and inspiring. Thank you so much for this morning. I'm probably going to want to follow up with you guys about a personal project of mine eventually. So there's a lot of good ideas here, but we are very grateful for your expertise this morning and all of the information that you were able to share with us, and certainly thrilled, Cara, for all the efforts Hope is making. That's just really good news as a resident of campus, obviously. So thank you all so much. If anybody else has anything else to say, feel free to do so now. Otherwise, I am going to let our wonderful presenters get on with the rest of their busy days, I'm sure. So
Excellent presentation. Thank you so much. So
Thank
much information. Excellent.
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you today. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. It was great.